John, the hammock looks comfortable as always. Um, yeah, nice to have a chance to connect with you guys all today. The Again, part of the theme of these classes has been the experience of integrating meditation with sort of like busy work life, and the this meeting with our CEO that I have just before this meditation class each day ran like up to like just a few minutes before the start. So I'm really getting the convergence of the height of work experience and trying to deliver the height of inner peace. So we'll we'll explore that together. Um, what I what I wanted to share about today was about storytelling and about the way our mind is constantly storytelling. I think I started off these classes 9 months ago with referring to us as storytelling primates, and at the center of the story is this hero that is our self. But I wanted to dig a little bit more into what that means, that the way in which we operate using stories, how that works, um, and how we can begin to retell our story, begin to reimagine our own story, begin to reimagine the story of those that we're around. Because I think that's sort of the deepest life journey that we can have, is sort of rediscovering a more profound story for ourselves and for others, a more satisfying story. Okay. The meditations that have been guiding, I'll go back along the same lines, moving through these more subtle levels. We're starting with just some physical awareness and focus on our breathing, and then focusing on this inner energy in our body, just our own sort of life force, and then going even deeper into the core of our being and into our heart as a meditation. And so, as usual, we can start just by sitting comfortably and taking a deep breath in and out. Letting ourselves relax, decompress. And then asking ourselves this question: what is important now? Even that is reframing our own mental story. And our breathing is also a way to get in touch with the sensations of our body. So within all of the things we may think about or become aware of, we start to become aware of our body. We just try to feel the sense of our limbs, our arms and legs, our torso, head. Where are we feeling comfortable? Where are there any pains? How are we holding our body? Becoming aware of our whole body is part of telling that story, beginning to look at the story that is with us all the time, but perhaps not being told. This subconscious story of our body, we're making it conscious. Just become aware, head to toe, of this body that we're carrying along with us. What is its story? Some of the story is that we are alive, and we can feel our breathing going in and out. Breathing is the most obvious sign of life, but what are all of the other subtle signs? The sense awarenesses, our sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And the static, the background noise, the buzz in our ears, tingling throughout our body. All of these subtle signs of life. They're coming from deep inside of us. So we take our attention below the surface of our body into the core of our being, just imagining running through the center of our body is like a column, like a pillar that is supporting the crown of our head, like an invisible architectural structure holding us up. We feel like the surface of our body becoming the nature of light, and the core of our being right through the center of our body becoming like a column of light, hollow column of light. We can call our central channel. We bring our attention inside the body. And within this body, at the very center is our heart. We can say it is the center of our life force. We just imagine like some radiant light in the center of our chest, like a warm fire burning in the center of our home, and feel how we naturally gravitate towards that warmth, that inner warm heart. Just like we would move in towards a fire burning in a large house, we bring our attention into our heart, feeling a warm heart. If we're at all uncomfortable with our meditation, we just relax a bit and back off. But if we feel comfortable, we just let our mind settle more deeply inside, more deeply into our heart. And we can feel that just like the fire burning in the center of a home gradually fills the whole home. So we imagine all of the warmth and energy and life in our body is radiating from this central place in our heart. even all of our distracting thoughts are emerging from this central place of our heart. All of those stories are just part of our own life force, just arising from this space in the very center of our being. And if it helps us, we can give this a sound, and we can associate that ringing in our ears with this, the sound of this inner energy in our heart, a sound like a hum sound. we can gently become aware that this inner experience in our heart is not really different from the inner experience that everyone is having, this experience of life. That we are on a profound level connected at the heart with every other living being who is going through their own journey, their own story. We can just have a gentle sense of gratitude for those around us who have helped us to reach this point in our life, who've helped us to get here where we are today. And we can generate a wish that through our brief time here together, we may take this as a learning opportunity to increase our capacity to repay the kindness of those around us. And with this wish, we can open our eyes and gently arise from our meditation. When people look at the world from a deep scientific point of view, whether in physics or chemistry or biology, often the most useful conclusions come from simplifying that world down into its most basic elements. Things like matter and energy and motion and so forth. And so this sort of celebrated E equals mc squared is just sort of saying that even matter and energy can be related to one another. But there's another incredibly important fundamental element that I was not taught in elementary school or high school, learned a little bit about in college, but even from the point of view of physicists, information is one of these core elements, energy and information. And so living beings beings with minds, such as ourselves, what do? We're gathering information and storing information and trying to act on information and trying to survive and sustain our life, taking in more energy than we put out, hopefully roughly balanced calorie intake, surviving, maybe reproducing, sowing our genetic material into future generations, or teaching, helping each other, helping society, helping our tribes, our community. At a basic level, if you look at our human life, it goes something like that. We've inherited some genetic material and a bit of energy. Our parents incubate us, raise us up, give us more information from society, send us out on our own. We do our best to make sense of the world, have an impact on our world. Eventually we die. Most of the storytelling that we do is about the success side of our adventure. Those are the stories we like watching, right? Stories that are, heroes or superheroes, stories that end in happily ever after. There's enough difficulties in our life. We normally like success stories as our entertainment, but we really crave, we just love sitting down, relaxing, listening to a good story, watching movies, TV, where we can participate in the story without having to necessarily expose ourselves to all of the risk or exert the energy of doing it ourselves. So, but all of our lives, there's always this arc, right? We sort of reach our peak, whatever that is, and then there's some kind of decline, and that's all of the sad and scary stuff, right? Like aging, sickness, death, loss, pain, the stuff that nobody wants to tell stories about. Yet again, we have a decrepit dog in our home. This dog is very, very actively in the dying process, and so our home's been transformed into a hospice for dogs, which for my wife and I is sort of an amazing opportunity to be close to death, because it's not something that comes along every day. And we're watching this dog sort of, decline, but the dog is being pretty cool about it. We're being pretty cool about it. It's not enormously emotional, but we're trying to create the best conditions we can. But it's a chance for us to think about all of the awkwardness that surrounds sort of end of life, and the way that vets behave at the end of life. They recommend euthanasia because it's the last payment that the vet can get. And the way when humans, you generally don't, medical professionals avoid euthanasia generally because you can always get more money from a human if you keep them alive for another day. Somebody will pay, the government or the family or insurance companies or something. So you sort of see the economics of this, but then there's also just we're generally not very comfortable with death, and it's painful and it's scary, and we don't want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about loss and so forth. But it's a very powerful part of our story. And there's a more full story that we can tell when we think about both our success and loss, and we think about the whole story. This energy, this life force we were born with, right? We're born doing two things, right? We're born breathing, and we're born learning, and eating and crying and a few other things, right? But there's always this wish to sustain the energy of our life, but there's always this wish to take in more information, to learn, and so forth. So our life is a learning journey. And this learning journey is also about sharing our wisdom, our knowledge with the people around us. And so this is a way we can find meaning in our life, is through developing wisdom and sharing wisdom. Whenever we, whenever we tell a story, we're always simplifying things, right? Information is simplifying things. Information technology, right? You can take something very complicated and store it as just one bit or byte, or and it's just sort of a reference, like a word. If I say earth, right? Immediately in your minds, there's a picture of that, right? I've used one little symbol, and you have this huge, incredibly complicated thing, Earth, all represented with that one symbol. And if I say Earth, I say, do you know what I mean when I say Earth? And you're like, sure, I know the Earth. We do, right? But of course, needless to say, we're dramatically simplifying. When we think about the Earth, right, there's a dramatic simplification that goes on. We're ignoring a lot of details. And when every moment of every day we're telling a story while we're awake, we're telling a story, right? And the story is, this is happening to me and I'm going to do this. The story is about what's happening to us and what we're going to do and who we are and what the world is like. Those four things. And those four things all come from one thing. And they all come from this one sense of like self, like there's a me here. As soon as there is a self, there is an other. And the other is simply everything that's not the self, right? And when we think of ourselves, just like when we think about the earth, we're dramatically oversimplifying the picture. If I say I'm like this, and I used to be like this, and now I'm like this, and I'm going to go, we're actually dramatically oversimplifying things. We're like a lot of things, right? We're like so many things, endless things. We've got a little bit inside of ourselves. We've got a little bit of everybody, right? And we tend to always oversimplify everything. We are like, we tend to think, okay, this person is kind and generous, and this person is unkind and self-centered. But really, there's a little bit of self-centeredness and unkindness in the heart of every kind person. And there's at least the potential for a kind person in the heart of every person who's looks superficially mostly unkind and ungenerous. You know, I'm sure Hitler was a perfectly lovely person if you really got to know him, and his cat, I'm sure, loved him, and that's what muddies the story, right? It muddies the simplicity of the stories we like to tell ourselves, because yeah, and so that's it's tricky, right? Because the hero's journey that we're trying to go through, the hero's journey is a journey of, we're born and we try to have success after success after success. And we have this life energy, and we just want to thrive. We want to accumulate experiences and friends and possessions and knowledge, and like just collect, accumulate all this stuff. But what's happening with everything we do, all the stuff that we accumulate, is we're actually becoming more complex, right? We're becoming a bigger thing, right? And what happens with bigger things is that they're hard. There's more. I'm kind of blending in the computer science world. If you get a computer system, it's really small and really simple, it's very easy to defend and protect, right? And the bigger that system becomes, the bigger the software is, the bigger the network is, the harder it is to defend, the more attack surface area there is. I don't know if that analogy will resonate with you if you're not spending time in the computer world, but the more complex we become, the more things that can go wrong. The more houses we have, the more houses can have problems, right? The more friends we have, the more friendships can go wrong, or but we still, as we become more complex, we still tell ourselves this really simple story of who we are, because at the end of the day, we're still just me, right? I did this, and now I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to do that. And so what happens over the course of our life, we actually become exposed to much more risk. The more we accumulate, the more risk there is of losing things. And so we accumulate many sorrows, right? Many risks, many pains, many disappointments. As much as we accumulate success, we also accumulate disappointments. We make one bit of progress, but then we can't make the next one. And because we begin to take for granted all of the things that we've accumulated and accomplished in the past. And so there's something, it's just on a very profound level, when we are just the way we think, just the way we tell stories, we always tell this story with I in the center. And that I, just like the letter I, is kind of like the symbol for one bit in computer science, right? I is just one bit of information, one token of information. It's like in the middle, I. And because that sense that we have of I is simplifying everything, we're actually taking everything for granted. We're forgetting that we even have a body. We're forgetting about all of the complexities within our personality, and all of the incredible depth and richness and variation and so forth that's inside of ourself. That is, and so what's interesting is that even a practice like mindfulness, becoming aware of our body, mindfulness of the body, becoming aware of the body can be profound in a sense, because we forgot that we had this body. We just took it for granted. Beginning to become aware of our personality and things going inside our mind, going on inside our mind, mindfulness of our own mind, that can be profound, because we're basically opening up this one bit of information that we called our I or self, and beginning to realize it's a whole world in there. And when we begin to unpack the I and begin to see it as a whole world, like zooming in from the earth, and you actually land on the earth and you realize, wow, this is amazing, complex space. It broadens our perspective, and we begin, and the difference, first of all, one of the main things that happens is the difference between ourselves and others begins to break down. And so that sense of separateness, that sense of, oh, they're like this, I don't like them, or I don't want to be like this, that begins to break down, because that certainty in our mind that we know what's going on begins to soften up, right? We begin to, and I've really enjoyed the last few years. I don't watch a lot of TV or movies, but sometimes we do. And I felt like some of the TV I've seen over the last 10 years in movies has been a lot more nuanced than what I grew up with, right? Less and less I'm seeing like pure bad guys and pure good guys. I'm seeing a lot more good guys with some, questionable characteristics, and bad guys with some real redeeming characteristics, where you can say, well, if I was in this situation, I'd probably be a bad guy too, right? And you begin to see and you begin to see some of the nuance, and when you see that, our certainty about things softens up. We need certainty about things if we want to take action, and that's the sort of balance, and that's what's interesting, is that we have to stop taking action a little bit to begin to pull ourselves apart and realize that there's something just in the nature of taking action, of doing something, that requires that you sort of bring all of this incredible complexity together and just make a decision and just do something. And so every time you do an action, you're reinforcing this idea of the simple world. It's just me, and I'm going to do this, right? And you've got to simplify the world to take an action. But the more you simplify the world, the more you begin to forget what actually, all the complexity that makes you up, right? And so that includes, we begin to take things for granted, we begin to not notice our own bad habits and so forth. So that there's, as much as in our life we need to be taking action and doing stuff, we also need to be doing the reverse and beginning to sort of untangle some of this person that we've become, if we want to reshape some of our habits, if we want to relax some of the disappointments and develop more of a sense of gratitude or appreciation for what makes us up, what makes our world up. And it's interesting, just this balance of acting and then reflecting and analyzing and understanding, and our society obviously very more geared towards acting these days, like, because there's so much exciting stuff that you could learn and watch and do and connect with. There's so much to do, but the more we do, the more complicated our world becomes, the more disappointment, the more fragmented, the more frustrated, the more stressed, and so forth. And so we need this opposite motion as well, this sort of undo, to unlearn, to see that self that we thought we were just kind of disappear, and recognize that there's this whole world inside of us, like moving from the world Earth to actually seeing the Earth directly. And so this is what you could call this is some of the foundation for reimagining our own story, understanding how this story is built up through our actions. The same way we build habits, we build a story, and the habit of who we think we are. Well, who we think we are is one of our deepest habits. So the same way we build up this story and this habit of who we think we are, we can begin to reverse that, becoming aware of what makes us up, feeling grateful, seeing the similarity between ourselves and others, letting go of much of our certainty, considering opposite points of view. All of these are kind of in the nature of unlearning and allowing ourselves to retell a different story. I guess just to put a capstone on this this story that I've been telling you, the traditional Buddhist words for this, the constant action leading to constant storytelling of an I and so forth, is given the name samsara, which means the sort of endless cycle of existence, like always coming into existence, samsara. The unwinding of that, the cessation of that, and the cessation of that self, the cessation of the sufferings and disappointments and problems and stories and so forth that we tell, is called nirvana. So you've heard the word nirvana before, you thought it was a grunge rock band, little fuzzy on what that meant. That's what it means. It means untangling this story of self that is created through our constant activity. And why is that such a big message? It's because it is the solution to all of our problems and disappointments. And so it's interesting that at the end of the day, although you thought that the solution to all of your problems and disappointments was going on a vacation or doing, this or that, or, we're always thinking that the solution to our problems and disappointments is about getting something new or better, or doing something new or whatever. The solution to our problems and disappointments is learning a new story, or unlearning an old story, and in particular beginning to really looking at this story of the self, the story of who we think we are, and understanding how our actions make that person. Anyway, I hope that story is somewhat useful for you to reflect on. And so maybe we can bring this to some conclusion just with a bit of meditation at the end to let that settle in. And as usual, taking a deep breath in and out to reset. And then thinking, even in our deep sleep, there is still this story of I, this person we need to keep alive. Everything we do is reinforcing that story of me. But the more we do, the more we get caught up in this increasingly complex and vulnerable version of ourself. Like an animal caught in a snare, the more we struggle, the tighter the snare becomes. the harder we work, it can feel the more tied up, wound up we become. Because it's always the same story that we're telling ourselves. I, in the world, am doing this, and that is being done to me. So all we need to do is stop doing and begin to look inside the self and see that it is an entire world. And in this world that we call self are traces of every other living being. The whole of space, all the elements in the world. Traces of these things can be found in this being that we call ourself. And so we can have deep respect and humility, knowing that there is no real boundary or difference between myself and other. That boundary is a story. And we can think through this process of untangling this sense of self, retelling a different story. Within this, we can find perfect peace, the resolution to all of our dilemmas, even the dilemma of death. And finally, we can imagine what would happen if our mind became profoundly familiar with this truth. How could we help ourselves and others? And we just allow this thought and feeling to carry with us as we arise from meditation and proceed with our life.